The warm breeze flows on a peaceful summer day, and the sound of typing echoes in the air. A young boy, Kotoru, sits at his computer, relieved when he finally finishes his assignment. Relaxing in his chair, he picks up a book to read but doesn't get to unwind for long as his phone starts ringing. Begrudgingly, he walks toward the sound, grabbing a snack as he searches for his phone. When he finally finds it lying on the ground, he answers the call, discussing how everything went smoothly with the unpacking. Surprised by the unexpected response from the caller, he soon heads to Mitako, where he meets a couple. The man hands Kotoru his ticket while he turns to hug his wife. Kotoru isn't happy to see the affectionate couple in front of him and complains that they could have gone without him. The man counters, asking if he doesn't care about them getting lost on the trail. Kotoru argues that it's nearly impossible to get lost when using the cable car, but the man remains cautious about potential mishaps. Without further argument, Kotoru joins the couple, silently following them around and buying a box of snacks when they offer him food. As they walk along the track, Kotoru explains that track number 1 is well constructed, with stores and bathrooms. He introduces them to various attractions like the Monkey Park and the Good Luck Octopus, mentioning that cars can also pass through this track. The couple walks behind him, taking pictures as he explains that after passing the temple, they just need to follow the path to the summit. Kotoru notes that this place is more suited for sightseeing than hiking. He's about to say more when the woman interrupts, asking if he researched a lot about this place since he seems to know so much. Kotoru replies that he doesn't have much information, while the man tells his wife how Kotoru has spent his life here. The locals of Hachioji often visit the mountain, even for school trips. The woman, satisfied with the explanation, asks Kotoru why he doesn't seem happy to return since he recently moved back. He admits that he doesn't have good memories associated with this place. Just then, a strong wind starts blowing, nearly knocking them off their feet. The man quickly checks on his wife, while Kotoru stares off into space, murmuring how this is the place where a Tengu kidnapped him. Upon reaching the temple, the couple asks Kotoru for more details about his abduction. He tells them it was very mysterious, but he has no memories of the incident, only stories from his relatives. The man inquires if he lost his memories due to the shock. Kotoru responds that his body seems to remember, as if it wants to stop him from coming here. Later, while sitting alone on a bench, his thoughts swirl around the strangeness of the incident. Back in elementary school, he couldn't recall anything about being lost in the mountains, but he feels someone intentionally covered up those memories. He senses he has visited this place before and remembers crying out of fear. He is curious about how he was rescued, but he reassures himself that it's probably good he can't remember, as it was a traumatic experience. Suddenly, the couple returns, but Kotoru feels something strange as blurry memories of a girl surface. The couple continues discussing Tengus and their similarities to yokai. The man mentions that the god here is also a Tengu, assuming Kotoru knows this. They talk about 2 statues, one of a man with a long nose and another with a beak, and admire the beautiful leaves of the season. Meanwhile, Kotoru recalls someone mentioning the names of trees and plants, and a realization hits him. He has met someone here. He starts running ahead, standing on the edge of a small cliff, recognizing the path ahead. As he descends, a twig cuts his cheek, and a flashback hits him. He remembers being at the same spot with someone else. He takes a step but gets tangled in a branch, almost falling. Turning around, he comes face to face with a giant wolf and a girl wearing a bird mask. Kotoru stares in shock as the girl warns him not to come here, saying there can't be a third time. Before he can process what is happening, he finds himself sitting on the temple stairs. The man asks if something is wrong, but Kotoru dismisses him, lost in thought about the girl. Back at home, he cooks dinner while glancing at the compass in his hand. Late at night, he decides to return to the mountain, surprised by how dark it is, a stark reminder of how scary it must have been for a child. As he steps forward, he's surprised that no one is trying to stop him this time. Kotoru feels a deep sense that he can't remember something very important and that he needs to meet someone here. Suddenly, his foot slips and he falls into a ditch. The accident triggers another flashback. He remembers crying because of his injuries, sitting beside a giant dog. A young girl approached him, asking if he had been crying for long and then offering to see his injured hand. Despite her concern, she effectively heals his wound, and Kotoru finally stops crying. She kneels in front of him, suggesting they go get some medicine, and for the first time, he sees her beautiful face. Back in the present, Kotoru wakes up to find the girl from his childhood sitting in front of him. She's worried about his injuries, but he just stares at her and the small wings on her back. When he remains silent for several moments, she waves her hand in front of his face, asking if he hit his head. Before she can finish, Kotoru interrupts, asking if she was the one who rescued him in the past. Without waiting for an answer, he recounts how he got separated from his school group and fell beside the giant dog. The girl seems surprised he still remembers her. Kotoru quickly holds her hand, repeating everything that happened that day. Startled, she asks if he remembers their promise. Seeing his blank expression, she realizes he can't recall it and begins to scream at him for coming back despite her warnings. Her words echo in his mind. She had told him not to return for the third time. Her agitation deepens when she asks if he knows the rules of the village. Kotoru stares at her, clueless, as she struggles to explain what it means for two people who meet 3 times under the sacred tree. A deep blush coats her cheeks as she suddenly hugs Kotoru, revealing that those who meet under this tree must get married. In a sacred house, a lively party unfolds with many people wearing bird masks, celebrating and indulging in food. Amidst the revelry, Kotoru sits with a solemn expression, unnoticed as everyone else is absorbed in feasting and discussing Hime's upcoming marriage. A masked man pours drinks for him, and Kotoru apologizes for zoning out, only to be reprimanded for saying sorry when he is, in fact, the groom. Confused, he tries to piece together how he ended up in this situation. Another man compliments his looks, and another remarks on the surprise of Hime choosing a human, speculating about the potential for them to have a tall son. As Kotoru struggles to remember events after slipping from the cliff, Hime bursts in, scolding everyone for organizing a banquet without her consent. When someone complains about her tardiness, Hime redirects the conversation, chastising another for saying she should wear a Tengu mask even though she is marrying Kotoru. Angrily, she insists that the mask is outdated. Observing this, Kotoru is struck by how they are using the same banner from her birthday party. One masked man explains that a banquet is customary after such news, but Hime, still irate, declares the party cancelled. Complaints arise from the guests, accusing Hime of bringing a man here impulsively and insisting they were merely trying to set everything up quickly. Despite Kotoru's attempts to interject, he is ignored. Hime explains that Kotoru has only recently regained his memories of their first meeting and is not yet ready for marriage. An elder man counters, noting that they have met 3 times under the sacred tree, revealing that Hime had expressed eagerness to marry the human. Hime blushes at this exposure but reluctantly admits the truth. The crowd then turns their attention to Kotoru, bombarding him with questions about his background and career. Hime attempts to intervene, but her efforts go unheard. Finally, Kotoru speaks up, sharing that he hails from Hachioji, works as a system engineer, and is currently single with no desire to marry. He thanks Hime for rescuing him and clarifies that he is not bound by village rules and will apologize if he has inadvertently broken one. Before he can finish, an old woman interrupts, insisting that he cannot do that. Hime tries to calm her grandmother, but the elder warns Kotoru about the consequences of disobeying their traditions, especially concerning Hime needing an heir. In a protective gesture, Hime steps in front of Kotoru, defending him and asserting that he is merely struggling to recall everything. Confusion flickers across her grandmother's face, prompting Hime to reassure her that she will help Kotoru regain his memories. Acknowledging the village rules, she requests some private time with Kotoru. Once they find a quiet moment away from prying eyes, Kotoru expresses his ignorance about the village's customs. Hime interrupts him, returning his mobile phone and suggesting they escape through the sky while everyone is preoccupied with drinking. She suggests they need to find him some shoes. Kotoru, still bewildered, questions her desire to marry him, reiterating his lack of interest in marriage. Hime softly reminds him that he has no real memories and reminisces about how he once chased her, repeatedly calling her name. Kotoru admits he can recall that, and Hime's smile deepens as she mentions that he must have a family to protect. A moment of reflection passes, and Hime apologizes for bringing him into this chaos. Just then, she finds his shoes and realizes he doesn't have a wallet. Kotoru searches his pockets, only to discover his compass is missing. Hime speculates that someone may have picked it up, and their conversation is interrupted when a group of children runs by, commenting on the presence of a human. As Hime's wings flutter with excitement, she asks if he has a small compass. Enchanted, Kotoru reaches out to touch her wings, surprised to find they are real and move under his fingertips. Hime blushes at his attention and suddenly asks if he is not afraid to touch a Tengu's wing. Kotoru admits he is scared, but their moment is cut short when they hear someone approaching. Hime quickly ushers him into a nearby room. While hiding, they overhear Tengus criticizing Hime for showing her face to a human. They express concern that she should focus on her duties as a leader instead of bringing in an outsider. Once the corridor falls silent, Hime murmurs that those Tengus will be held accountable for their disrespectful comments. Kotoru is surprised to learn she is the leader, thinking it was her grandmother. Hime explains that her family, including her parents and grandparents, were leaders before passing away. Although the villagers raised her, she feels irritation toward their traditional views. Suddenly, Hime excitedly asks Kotoru for his opinion on whether shorter hakama would be cuter. Without waiting for a response, she rambles about how masks are an outdated tradition that ruin her hair. Kotoru hesitantly agrees that it's easier to communicate without masks, which delights Hime. She changes the topic, asking about the device she returned earlier, calling it a smartphone. When she correctly identifies it, her pride shines through as she mentions her familiarity with tablets and computers. Kotoru listens in fascination as she explains how climbers often lose their devices, and she collects them from the cliffs. Hime's fascination with the outside world grows as she describes people enjoying life, eating, taking pictures, and being with loved ones. Kotoru recalls what the other Tengus said about her. Hime continues, lamenting how she cannot use the devices since they are password protected and don't have electricity here. Being the village leader means she must marry and bear an heir, but her desire to experience life outside frustrates her. She stands up, apologizing for her rants, and promises to fetch her compass from Aichen. Kotoru tries to stop her, but she rushes off. Alone, he contemplates the voices outside, speculating whether Hime is genuinely getting married or planning to flee. He overhears a conversation about the strict rules governing her marriage and the expectation of her to bear children for the village's sake. In a serene clearing, Hime advises Kotoru to breathe deeply if he's scared, assuring him he won't fall, though he shouldn't look down if he's afraid of heights. Kotoru asks why no one has followed them, and Hime explains they are still celebrating. She presents the compass to him, but instead of handing it over, she clutches it tightly, revealing it as a protection charm she made because he treasures it. She wishes him health and asks him to take care of himself before turning to leave. Kotoru hesitates, voicing his concern about her potential punishment for breaking the rules. Hime reassures him, saying she hasn't faced severe consequences before, although her grandmother warns of dangers in defying tradition. With a smile, she insists this is her issue, and he shouldn't worry. Kotoru thinks deeply, declaring it doesn't concern him what rules this place follows. He suggests she has the right to defy them, emphasizing that she deserves to live life as she chooses. Hime is taken aback, considering that if she refuses to marry, her family line could end. Kotoru maintains that it's acceptable for her to prioritize her own happiness. He explains that while he respects her family, she should still escape to experience life. Hime begins to warm to the idea, asking if she'll get to wear Western clothes and shop in modern stores. When Kotoru affirms this, her excitement builds as she asks about exploring cities and riding trains, blushing at the thought. As she envisions wearing sneakers, trying new foods, and walking on the beach, her enthusiasm shines. Holding his hand, she declares they should enjoy all these experiences together. This unexpected proclamation stuns Kotoru, who protests that he didn't invite her to live with him. Ignoring his objections, Hime picks him up by the collar, insisting they must inform everyone about her decision. Flying through the air, she brings him back to the banquet hall, announcing she will live with Kotoru as his wife. The crowd cheers, but Kotoru is still trying to grasp the situation while Hime excitedly continues to chatter about their future together. Frustrated, he again tries to clarify his intentions, repeating that she should follow her heart, not the rules. Hime giggles, insisting her engagement to him is a way to abide by those rules since they will be living together. Kotoru attempts to counter her logic, but is interrupted by Hime's exuberant shout as they reach his house. Dropping him on the ground, she beams at his home, thrilled that it will be their new abode. Remembering her earlier words, Kotoru inquires about a promise he may have made her, but Hime refuses to divulge any details, hinting he should ask again once he recalls everything. As she hugs him tightly, she expresses her excitement about living happily together from that moment on. Kotoru sleeps peacefully on his couch, the soft sounds of the morning disrupted only by the ringing of his alarm. As he slowly wakes, he sees a notification reminding him to take out the trash. When he turns around, he's startled to find Hime sleeping at the table, her head resting on her arms. In her dreams, she mumbles about wanting more red rice, and it suddenly dawns on Kotoru that he had completely forgotten about her presence. Seeing that Hime is deeply asleep, he silently approaches her, his fingers grazing the feathers of her wings. The gentle touch sparks fleeting memories of his childhood, but before he can delve deeper, Hime awakens with a start. She calls him out for touching her wings while she sleeps, and Kotoru stumbles back, hastily apologizing. Hime, unfazed by his embarrassment, suggests they start over. She bows politely and insists that he needs to take care of her since she's unfamiliar with this new life. She hands him a small box, expressing her desire to meet his family. Frustration bubbles up in Kotoru, and he snaps at her, reminding her that he never invited her to stay in his house. Hime, undeterred, points out that he was the one who suggested she leave her village. Kotoru argues back, clarifying that he only meant she could experience the outside world. When Hime innocently states that she doesn't know anyone else, he inquires about any Tang communities. She explains that the other Tengus live in the mountains, which would feel similar to living in the village. Although he agrees with her reasoning, Kotoru still insists she should reconsider her decision and return to her village. Ignoring his protests, Hime begins unpacking her belongings. When he objects, she explains that the villagers already believe she is marrying him, so going back is not an option. Reluctantly, Kotoru concedes, allowing her to stay for a few days, but Hime refuses to accept this temporary arrangement. She chats casually about her things, asking where she should place her belongings. Then she pulls out a jar and calls for something to come out. Kotoru is taken aback when a fox suddenly emerges from the small pot. Staring in shock, he listens as Hime excitedly explains how she has many items stored in the jar. She offers him some sweets from the village, but Kotoru is still stunned and asks how she accomplished this. He questions if she possesses powers as a Tengu. Hime blushes slightly, saying he can call it magical powers but insists she isn't particularly talented since she's a Karasu Tengu. Suddenly grabbing her hand, Kotoru marvels at her abilities, observing how light appears to emanate from her palm. He praises her powers, but Hime pulls her hand away, teasingly asking if he enjoys touching others. Kotoru hastily apologizes, but she reassures him it's just her hand. Turning slightly away, she asks if he finds her body appealing. He tells her not to phrase it that way, but Hime ignores his discomfort, standing up to fetch her cleaning supplies. Once again, Kotoru is surprised by her magic as she unveils her cleaning tools, proudly asserting that she is a good wife. Showing off a dusting cloth makes Kotoru uncomfortable, and he urges her to relax. This frustrates Hime, who argues that she cannot be a good wife by being lazy. Skeptical about her cleaning knowledge due to her leadership background, he suggests she wouldn't know how to clean. Offended, Hime shares memories of running around with a mop as a child and that tatami rooms can't be cleaned in circles. Kotoru drops the argument and hands her a vacuum cleaner, explaining how it works and encouraging her to try it. Hime is astounded that it uses electricity, and when she presses the button, she joyfully cheers as it starts moving. Kotoru smiles slightly at her excitement, ready to tackle the laundry. As he prepares to leave, he overhears Hime deciding to clean the back room first. He quickly turns around, telling her she doesn't need to clean that room, but she's already opened the door. Her eyes widen in surprise at the sight of books piled high. When she asks if they are all his, he replies they belong to his late grandfather. Hime steps inside, enchanted by the collection, and excitedly picks out a book about yukai. She beams, commenting that Kotoru must really like yukai since all the books are about them. He attempts to deny it, but Hime teases him about his interest, leading her to wonder if this is why he finds her body fascinating. Kotoru sighs, repeating that the books are his grandfather's. Hime, still smug, expresses her desire to showcase her powers to Kotoru's grandfather, believing he would be impressed. However, when she turns around, she finds that Kotoru has already left the room. Peeking out the door, she calls his name, but he merely responds that he's going to do laundry. He mentions the library room is dirty, adding that she should take off her socks before entering. Hime, surprised, learns that he recently moved back to the house. After realizing her mistake, she apologizes for assuming he had always lived there. Kotoru hesitates, finally telling her he grew up in an orphanage. Hime's expression falls as she processes this information, sharing that she, too, lost her family but was always supported by her village. Kotoru explains that he had no one to look after him, casually noting that a child cannot live alone. He doesn't think much of it until he sees her somber expression. Hime asks if he felt alone, to which he replies he never thought of it that way. Not liking her pitying gaze, he's about to shift the topic when Hime suddenly points out that her socks are dirty. She stands up, determined to do the laundry instead. Kotoru tries to dissuade her, but she insists she can handle it. When he attempts to argue again, Hime declares she'll take charge of the laundry and clean from now on, vowing to wake him in the morning and prepare food for him. Kotoru stares in disbelief as Hime takes control of the situation. He tries to intervene, but she pays him no mind. Rushing to his room to grab his laundry, he feels relieved to have avoided her washing his underwear. With the basket in hand, he heads toward the washroom and asks Hime if she can use the washing machine. As he opens the door to the washroom, he's startled to find Hime changing clothes. He quickly slams the door shut, asking her what's wrong. Hime casually explains that she's just changing out of the clothes she wore yesterday and that she wants to wash her undergarments. Kotoru yells at her to warn him next time, realizing he was the one who opened the door without thinking. Hime peeks out, dressed in her robe, and inquires about his laundry. Kotoru shuts the door again, telling her not to come out wearing her kimono's underwear. Hime is confused, believing she is fully dressed. Meanwhile, Kotoru struggles to comprehend why she reacts so strongly when he touches her wings. Later, as he sits in his living room, he concludes that he truly needs to find a way to send Hime back to the mountains. Sitting around the table, Kotoru and Hime enjoy their meal when a loud growl from Hime's stomach breaks the calm. Annoyed, Kotoru asks why she's still hungry when she's on her fifth manju. Hime retorts that it's not her fault she's still hungry. Standing up, Kotoru points out that she can't fill up on manjuice alone, but unfortunately, there's nothing else in the fridge. Peering inside, he sighs, lamenting his lack of food, and decides to head to the convenience store. Just then, Hime spots a noodle packet on the side and expresses her desire to eat that. Kotoru warns her that the noodles won't taste as good as they look on the packaging, then asks if she likes ramen. Hime lights up, sharing that she's seen people eating it in the mountains and knows it just requires hot water. Always wanting to try it, she asks if she can prepare it herself. Kotoru nods, starting to prepare the instant noodles while telling her not to get too excited. However, Hime watches him in awe as he boils water. Sensing her enthusiasm, he invites her to join in the cooking. Confused but eager, she chooses the same flavor as him, and they both approach the stove. Kotoru guides her to open the lid halfway, and her heart races with excitement. She gasps at the sight of the dried ingredients, her face flushing with anticipation. Kotoru chuckles and instructs her to fill the cup with water up to the line. When Hime struggles to find the line, he points it out, and she finally begins pouring in the water. As the ingredients rise, Hime worries about spilling, but Kotoru reassures her that everything is fine. She gazes at the filled packet in wonder and then follows his direction to close the lid. They place their cups in the microwave, and Hime counts down the seconds eagerly. When the microwave dings, she jumps up, thrilled to see her noodles are ready. After confirming with Kotoru that it's time to eat, they sit back down and give a quick thanks for the meal. Hime dives in, her eyes lighting up as she savors the noodles. She exclaims how delicious they are, surprised by the unique flavor that differs from soy sauce. The strange wavy noodles, she notes, are delightfully soft, and the meat is tender. Kotoru informs her that they're actually called Chinese-style noodles, which only fuels her enthusiasm. Hime marvels at how something so delicious can be made just by adding hot water, her focus returning to her meal. Kotoru watches her with a tender smile, then suddenly chuckles. When she asks why, he suggests she could make another if she's still hungry. He teases her, knowing she enjoys eating. But Hime tries to deny it even as she finishes 3 more packets. Afterward, she thanks him, clapping her hands joyfully while Kotoru reflects on how much she truly loves to eat. Hime closes her eyes in bliss, giggling softly. She shares how she never imagined she'd get to eat noodles after leaving her home in the mountains. Remembering the unique taste of soba she once had, she expresses her gratitude for living in his house, sincerely thanking him for the experience. Kotoru is taken aback by her heartfelt words, his face flushing as he points out that it's just a cup of noodles. Hime insists that if they hadn't met, she would never have had this chance to enjoy such food, and she's eager to tell everyone how delicious it is. Curious about their reactions, she envisions sharing her discovery with the villagers. Kotoru shyly tells her he can make more dishes for her, prompting Hime to smile brightly. She excitedly pulls out another cup of noodles, while Kotoru thinks to himself that he might let her stay a while longer. Hime eagerly plans to clean the cups, intending to keep them in her collection, and once she finishes eating, she quickly tidies up everything, leaving Kotoru bewildered by her determination. Kotoru prepares a sandwich for Hime, allowing her to help with the small tasks. Her excitement is palpable as they layer the ingredients on the bread, and once they finish, he praises her for her effort as a beginner. Hime stares at the sandwich, marveling at how it looks so amazing despite having such a scary name. After confirming that the coffee is ready, they sit down to eat. As expected, Hime can't help but exclaim how good everything tastes. Kotoru silently enjoys his meal, relieved that he still had enough bread at home. While savoring her food, Hime expresses her disbelief that she's having such a delicious breakfast and mentions how she's looking forward to more food later. Kotoru hesitates and Hime, sensing his uncertainty, anxiously asks if they will have lunch. His assurance that he will cook anything she wants fills her with joy. He mentions he's thinking of buying some meat today, and her excitement is contagious. Suddenly, Hime remembers she needs to hang the wet futons and clean the house. Kotoru points out that she should prepare her room and tells her to bring her bag. However, Hime is not pleased with this suggestion, nearly shouting that they already agreed to sleep in the same room. Kotoru counters, reminding her of their conversation the previous day. Undeterred, Hime smiles brightly, declaring that she has already set up the futons, and casually asks which side he prefers as she's not picky. Ignoring her, Kotoru starts packing the futons, prompting Hime to protest that she just prepared them. He insists they will not sleep in the same room, claiming futons are uncomfortable. As he turns to walk away, Hime grabs his shirt with surprising strength, her determination unwavering as she insists they sleep together on a futon. Frustrated, he tosses the futons to the ground, asserting that this will be her temporary room. Hime frowns at the distance, voicing her displeasure. Kotoru struggles internally, wanting her to return to her mountains but keeping his thoughts to himself. Hime quickly shifts her focus to the food, asking if she can try it with the white sauce. Kotoru obliges, and as she takes a big bite, she comments on how it tastes sour compared to the red sauce, making Kotoru think about how wide her mouth is. Hime, grateful for the meal, offers him a bite in return, but he hesitates at the thought of eating from a half-eaten slice. Hime, however, insists that it tastes great, leading to playful bickering between them. Just then, a voice from outside interrupts them. Curious, Kotoru heads to the door and finds a delivery rider standing there. The man hands him registered mail and asks if he moved here recently. When Kotoru confirms that he just arrived this month, the rider mentions that someone had said so. Kotoru's confusion deepens as the rider explains that the house has been empty for a while and he thought he might have the wrong address. The man mentions that the Tsukisaka family once lived there and expresses happiness to see Kotoru back, leaving him taken aback. He thanks the man, who departs, leaving Kotoru surprised that some people still remember his family after 20 years. Returning inside, Hime watches him eagerly and asks if he received a letter. Kotoru suddenly becomes aware of how different she looks with her silver hair, golden eyes, and small wings. Panic surges through him as he quickly shuts the door, frustrated with himself for forgetting how others might react to her presence. He worries about what kind of uproar this could create on social media, fearing for Hime's safety if she were to be discovered. His thoughts spiral, imagining the consequences for her and the other Tengus, potentially leading to experimentation by humans. Hime notices his pale expression and suggests he's hiding something. Kotoru brushes it off, gently patting her hair to distract her. When she asks why he did that, he tells her it's to remind her to pay more attention to her appearance. He's determined to keep her hidden from the outside world. Trying to steer the conversation, he insists she prepare her bedroom. Hime protests, but Kotoru mumbles that it will keep her safe from prying eyes. Their conversation is cut short when an old woman appears in the doorway, staring at them. Kotoru rushes out to greet her, his heart racing. She seems delighted to see him and tries to recall the name of her son, to which Kotoru informs her he is the grandson. The woman apologizes for her poor eyesight, mentioning how even her grandchildren tease her. Relieved that she probably didn't notice Hime, Kotoru engages in conversation. The old woman reminisces about his childhood, sharing memories of how he loved eating watermelons with his grandmother. Her stories warm Kotoru's heart, and he smiles as she recalls how he would devour all the ohaji his grandmother made, remembering fondly how he used to bring food to her. The conversation fills him with nostalgia as the old woman praises him for how much he has grown. After the brief yet heartwarming encounter, Kotoru returns inside, pocketing his compass. He finds Hime sitting silently in her room, murmuring that she too likes ohaji. When Kotoru agrees they are delicious, Hime suggests she could make some, then realizes her statement might not be appropriate. He gently pats her head, reassuring her. Kotoru leaves to fetch a heater for her while Hime goes back to reading. Soon after, several neighbors stop by, bringing fresh vegetables and supplies. Kotoru feels a mix of annoyance and concern. He worries that if this continues, Hime's presence might be discovered. Suddenly, Hime's stomach growls loudly, prompting Kotoru to laugh. He suggests they should eat something and prepares to order food, but to his disappointment, all the home delivery options are closed. Just as he's about to leave for the convenience store, Hime pulls out some paper menus she found, asking if they can use them. A wave of nostalgia washes over Kotoru as he takes the menus from her, recalling how he used them in the past. Hime eagerly requests curry udon, and despite being surprised by her choice since she had tried it before, he agrees to order. When the delivery rider arrives, he asks Kotoru if he lived there before. When Kotoru confirms, the man shares that his father used to get many orders from this house, mentioning that a boy loved to eat mochi. Kotoru is stunned, trying to process the connection. Back inside, he opens the steaming pots of food, and Hime is immediately captivated by the aroma. Kotoru tells her the broth smells good, and when she asks what he ordered, he tells her he's fine with anything. As Hime admires the spread, Kotoru reflects on the writer's words, and he suddenly remembers the flavors from his childhood. With a murmured realization, he takes a bite, the taste flooding back and eliciting a smile from Hime as she watches him enjoy his meal. Once they finish eating, Kotoru comments on how he has overeaten, while Hime casually states she is still hungry. Her big smile lights up the room as she asks what they should eat next, excitedly suggesting they can order more food. Hime declares they will eat a lot together from now on. When Kotoru questions if food is the only thing on her mind, she clarifies that she just sees so many delicious things she wants to try. As she begins to dream up all the tasty meals, Kotoru gathers his thoughts, preparing to tell her something important. The next morning, when Kotoru opens his eyes, he is met with the sight of a widely smiling Hime. Startled, he quickly sits up on the couch, and Hime complains that he should just use the futons instead of sleeping here every night. Ignoring her complaints, Kotoru asks what she is wearing on her head. Hime happily points toward the table, proudly announcing that she prepared breakfast for him. Kotoru's eyes widen as he sees the food laid out, and he asks if she made rice clumps. Hime quickly corrects him, stating that it is clearly anjuri, adding with a smile that she is very talented at making it. Kotoru picks up one of the rice balls, noticing how it isn't entirely made of rice. Hime explains that she filled them with various ingredients, detailing the fillings of eggs and meat she used, along with the sauces. Excitedly, she suggests he try the rice ball first. Kotoru is surprised that she has already figured out how to use the rice cooker. When he expresses his surprise, Hime replies that she used some of his pots, even though they are different from what she is used to at home. Hastily, Kotoru rushes into the kitchen, only to find it in complete disarray. Hime quickly defends herself, insisting that she was trying to make miso soup but couldn't find the ingredients. When Kotoru points to a dirty pot and questions her about it, Hime insists she was merely trying to make the soup herself. He then asks her how she plans to deal with the mess, but before she can answer, he tells her she doesn't even need to cook. Hime innocently replies that she hasn't done anything to be a good wife while living in his house, so cooking is the least she can do to learn. Kotoru reassures her that it isn't written anywhere that a good wife must cook. She looks confused by his strange statement, prompting him to explain how everything has become easier these days. He pulls 2 packets from the refrigerator and tells her to put the ingredients in a bowl. Following his instructions, she adds hot water, and to her surprise, they end up with a delicious miso soup. Kotoru beams with pride, and Hime remarks that it's like cup ramen, noting how it smells just like the real thing. As they eat, Kotoru is pleasantly surprised by the taste of Hime's rice balls. After breakfast, he tells her that he is going out and warns her not to leave the house under any circumstances. While shopping for groceries, he finds himself worrying about her. When someone invites him out for drinks, he declines, reflecting on how he has bought a lot of supplies for both of them. This unexpected behavior confuses him. He never intended to marry her. Upon returning home, his thoughts are interrupted when he sees Hime sitting outside with an old lady. Panicking, he rushes over and scolds Hime for leaving the house, but she happily explains that the grandma had dangos for him, having remembered his fondness for red bean paste. He starts to drag her inside but halts when the old lady mentions how he must be planning to marry Hime. Hime, delighted by the implication, chimes in that she is practicing to be a good wife. Before Kotoru can respond, the grandma brings up her granddaughter, and Hime giggles at the thought. When the conversation turns to a candy shop, Kotoru can't hold back any longer and asks the old lady if she isn't curious about Hime's wings. The grandma brushes it off, thinking it's a trend among young people, and Kotoru feels relieved that she believes Hime is just cosplaying. He is thankful for her poor eyesight, which allows her to overlook how real Hime's wings appear. His relief is short-lived when he spots a delivery rider staring at Hime's wings in astonishment. Quickly, Kotoru pushes Hime inside to prevent any further complications, apologizing to the rider and claiming they are filming something for his website. Once the coast is clear and the old lady leaves, Kotoru storms into the room, chastising Hime for leaving the house. Hime explains that the grandma wanted to give him dangos, and she insists that it's okay if people see her since she often meets humans on Nichitakao. Kotoru, however, argues that this place is different from the mountains. Hime still doesn't understand human society, and Kotoru worries about the potential problems if anyone were to capture her image and expose her village. Hime tries to apologize, but he cuts her off, suggesting she return to the mountains. He regrets bringing her here, but Hime hugs him tightly, saying she doesn't want to go back. Kotoru brushes her off, insisting that she didn't heed his warnings. Conflicted about the future, he feels she is a burden, urging her to go back home. Hime quietly apologizes and retreats to her room. As the day wears on, Kotoru becomes increasingly anxious about her well-being since she hasn't eaten or drunk anything. Just as he is about to check on her, the door opens, and Hime emerges with tear-streaked cheeks. Softly, she asks if she can sleep in the same bed with him one last time before returning home, and Kotoru, unable to deny her request, agrees. Later that night, as Kotoru lies in bed, he reflects on their earlier conversation. He has set their fucans far apart, but worries that Hime might be uncomfortable. However, she reassures him that it's fine as long as they are in the same room. Breaking the silence, Hime asks if he is still awake, then quickly apologizes for her selfish request. She expresses her feelings of being a burden, lamenting that she has been too focused on herself without considering what he is going through. Despite her self-reflection, she cherishes the time they've spent together, vowing to remember these few days fondly. Ever since arriving in this world, she has been captivated by everything around her, realizing that it was all the more special because she was with Kotoru. Hime thanks him for showing her this world and asks him to take care of himself when she is gone. After she falls asleep, Kotoru stares at her back, pondering how long it has been since he shared his life so intimately with someone. The next morning, Hime wakes to find Kotoru already busy in the kitchen. Surprised to see him cooking, she hesitantly asks if he needs her help. Kotoru explains that cooking is natural for him, as he has lived alone, but he just hasn't felt like it. They begin to eat together, and Kotoru apologizes for shouting at her the previous day. He confesses that even though it is good for her to stay, it could also put her in danger, despite being the one who suggested she come here. Hime quickly reassures him that he is a good person who always cares for her and others. She acknowledges that her actions have been selfish, complicating things for him. Kotoru admits he lied about her being a burden. In truth, he has enjoyed her company. Having never imagined living with someone else, he finds that it is nice, which leads him to think she can continue living with him. When Hime tries to respond, Kotoru interrupts her, urging her to forget about marriage and village rules for the moment. He expresses his desire for her to live the life she wants, promising to help her with everything. He contemplates how she can remain safe while living here, declaring that he will cook for her every day and take her out to explore when possible. He takes on the responsibility of their situation, acknowledging that she might find it hard to believe him because he has hurt her before. If she wishes to stay and experience this life, she can do so without him asking if anything is difficult. Kotoru also warns her that this house isn't perfect and that she will need to endure harsh weather. Suddenly, he panics as Hime bursts into tears, quickly apologizing for making her cry. Hime admits to being selfish and asks if she can really stay. She expresses her fondness for the house and her desire to be with Kotoru. He confirms that she can stay, but she must follow his instructions until he can find a solution to their issues. After they settle everything, Hime resumes eating her food with a smile. Kotoru jokingly mentions that there are plenty of good guys around and she can leave whenever she finds a lover. Hime blushes, saying he is the first to mention such things, but refuses to disclose what he should say. She adds that she will wait for him to regain his memories. When Kotoru presses for details, she gets annoyed, and he fumbles to say he will repeat whatever it is, still unaware of what that entails.
Here I am, know it's been a while. I was in denial.